Snow battered the windows of JFK International, but inside the first-class cabin of Flight 44 to London, the air was freezing for a different reason. Victoria St. Clair, a woman whose purse cost more than most cars, stared down her nose at the young black girl, settling into seat 1A. She saw a hoodie, a backpack, and a mistake. She saw someone she could bully. What Victoria didn't see was the signature on the bottom of the airline's ownership deed. She was about to pick a fight with the woman who signed the pilot's paychecks, and when the karma hit, it didn't just hurt, it was terminal. The air inside the exclusive Diamond Lounge at JFK Airport smelled of expensive espresso aged leather and the distinct crisp scent of old money. Outside, a blizzard was threatening to ground half the eastern seaboard, burying New York under 6 inches of slush and misery. But inside the sanctuary of the lounge, the chaos was merely a silent movie playing behind triple-paned glass. Victoria St. Clair swirled her Pinot Grigio, checking her reflection in the darkened window. At 52, Victoria had curated her life with the precision of a museum archivist. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a rigid, immovable helmet of sophistication. Her coat was vintage cashmere, her jewelry discreet but heavy enough to sink a small boat. She was the wife of Jonathan St. Clair, a real estate mogul, whose name adorned 3 mid-tier skyscrapers in Manhattan. Victoria wore his net worth like armor. "The weather is looking dreadful," she said to no one in particular, though she ensured her voice carried enough to alert the lounge staff that she required attention. A young server whose name tag read Timothy materialized instantly. "We are monitoring the storm closely, Mrs. St. Clair. Flight 44 to London. Heathrow is currently the priority departure. We don't anticipate significant delays for your cabin." "I should hope not," Victoria snapped, taking a sip. "I have Christmas dinner at the Dorchester. If I am late, I will hold you personally responsible." "Of course, ma'am." Victoria dismissed him with a flick of her wrist. She checked her phone. Jonathan wasn't coming. Business in Tokyo. She preferred it this way. Flying alone meant she didn't have to share the armrest even in a private suite. It meant the flight attendants focused solely on her. She scanned the lounge, her eyes acting as a high-speed scanner for net worth. She catalogued the other passengers, a tech bro in a blazer, harmless and elderly couple dripping in diamonds acceptable, and a tired-looking diplomat reading a dossier boring. Then the lounge doors hissed open. Victoria's lip curled. The figure that walked in didn't belong. It was a girl. A young black girl, likely no older than 24. She was wearing an oversized charcoal grey hoodie that looked like it had been stolen from a boyfriend, black leggings and battered sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in chaotic braids, and she was carrying a backpack that looked like it had survived a war zone. She held a take-out coffee cup from a generic terminal kiosk, not the lounge's porcelain service. Victoria watched horrified as the girl walked past the concierge desk. The concierge, usually a Rottweiler about entry passes, simply nodded at the girl. Unbelievable, Victoria thought. Staff travel. Or perhaps a contest winner. Charity cases ruining the ambiance. The girl, who seemed exhausted, dropped her bag onto a pristine leather armchair 3 seats away from Victoria. She pulled out a tablet, plugged in wired headphones, wired and slumped down, closing her eyes for a moment. Victoria felt a righteous indignation bubble in her chest. The Diamond Lounge was a sanctuary. It cost $12,000 a year just for the membership, on top of the first-class ticket. To see someone who looked like they should be waiting for a Greyhound bus occupying this space was an insult to the ecosystem. Victoria cleared her throat, loudly. The girl didn't move. Victoria cleared her throat again, a sharp, hacking sound like a car engine failing to start. The girl opened one eye, sliding one earbud out. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, but currently glazed with fatigue. "Are you okay, Mom? Do you need water?" The voice was calm, distinctively American, but soft. "I am fine," Victoria said, her voice dripping with ice. "I am just wondering if you are aware that this is the Diamond Lounge. The general boarding area is out by gate 12. The girl looked around the room, then back at Victoria. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. "I'm aware. Thanks for the heads up, though." She put the earbud back in. Victoria stiffened. The audacity. She looked around for Timothy, but the server was busy with the diplomat. Fine, she thought. If the staff won't police the standards, the patrons must. "Excuse me," Victoria said louder this time. She stood up and walked over, looming over the girl's chair. The girl sighed, pausing her music again. She looked up, her expression shifting from tired to guarded. "Yes." "I don't think you understand," Victoria whispered, harshly, leaning in so the diplomat wouldn't hear. "This area is for first-class passengers only, not economy plus. Not friends and family upgrades. If you snuck in here to steal snacks, I suggest you leave before I call security. It will be very embarrassing for you." The girl stared at Victoria for a long silence. She looked at Victoria's Chanel bag, her manicured nails, and the vein throbbing in her forehead. "I have a ticket," the girl said simply. "And I'm tired. It's Christmas Eve. Can we just chill?" "Show me," Victoria demanded. "Show you what? Your boarding pass. If you belong here, prove it." The girl laughed, a short, dry sound. "I don't have to prove anything to you. Go sit down, lady." Victoria gasped. She actually gasped, clutching her pearls instinctively. "You rude little Mrs. St. Clair." It was Timothy. He had appeared at Victoria's elbow, looking nervous. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there is." Victoria pointed a manicured finger at the girl. "This person is harassing me, and I strongly suspect she is trespassing. Check her credentials. Now." Timothy looked at the girl in the hoodie. His face went pale. He swallowed hard. "Mom," Timothy said to the girl, his voice trembling slightly. Can I get you anything? A sparkling water champagne?" The girl looked at Timothy and softened. "Just a green tea, Tim. Extra honey. My throat is killing me." "Right away," Timothy said, bowing his head. He turned to Victoria. "Mrs. St. Clair, please return to your seat. We are boarding in 10 minutes. Victoria stood frozen. Her brain couldn't compute the data. The server had ignored her command and offered the intruder tea. "You know her," Victoria hissed at Timothy. "She is a frequent flyer," Timothy said, backing away. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Frequent flyer, right. A drug dealer then, or a rapper's girlfriend." That explained the lack of class and the entitlement. "This isn't over," Victoria muttered, smoothing her coat. She glared at the girl one last time. "Enjoy the tea. It's likely the last luxury you'll taste today." The girl didn't even look up from her tablet. "Merry Christmas to you too." The boarding process for Flight 44 was usually a ballet of efficiency. Because of the blizzard, the jet bridge was freezing, the wind howling against the aluminum tunnel. Victoria St. Clair swept onto the plane, bypassing the shivering line of economy passengers, and turned left into the first-class cabin. This was her kingdom. The cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was fitted with only 8 exclusive suites. They were pods of privacy featuring lie-flat beds, sliding doors and 24-inch screens. Victoria found her seat, 1K the window seat on the right side. She began the ritual of settling in. Coat to the attendant, a flustered woman named Sarah Handbag, stowed pre-departure champagne, accepted. She felt the tension of the lounge fading. She was safe here. The riffraff was being funneled into the back of the plane like cattle, and then she saw the hoodie. Victoria froze her champagne flute halfway to her lips. Walking down the aisle of the first-class cabin, dodging the flight attendants, was the girl. The same girl. Backpack slung over one shoulder, dragging her feet. Victoria watched, waiting for the girl to pass through the cabin and head toward business or economy. But she didn't pass. The girl stopped at seat 1A, directly across the aisle from Victoria. Victoria watched in stunned silence as the girl threw her backpack into the overhead bin, kicked off her sneakers, and curled up in the massive leather seat of 1A. Seat 1A was the prime spot. It was the captain's favorite seat for deadheading. It was the seat usually reserved for diplomats or A-list celebrities. The girl pulled her hood up, covering her eyes, and curled into a ball. Victoria slammed her champagne down on the side table. Liquid sloshed over the rim. "Excuse me," Victoria shouted. The cabin went silent. The other 4 passengers, currently boarded, 2 businessmen, and a wealthy-looking doctor, looked up. Sarah, the flight attendant, rushed over. "Mrs. St. Clair, is everything all right?" "No, it is not." Victoria pointed across the aisle. "Why is she here?" Sarah looked at the girl in 1A who hadn't moved. Sarah lowered her voice. That is the passenger for 1A, ma'am." "Impossible," Victoria hissed. "Do you know how much these tickets cost? That is a $15,000 seat. That girl is wearing a hoodie that smells like a gymnasium. There has been a mistake, a computer error. She has clearly stolen a ticket or manipulated the system." "Mrs. St. Clair, please," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously at the girl. "I have checked the manifest. Her ticket is valid. Please keep your voice down." "I will not keep my voice down when my safety is at risk," Victoria announced, turning to address the other passengers. "Does anyone else feel comfortable flying across the Atlantic with someone who looks like a fugitive?" The businessman in 2A frowned. "She looks like a kid lady." "Leave her alone." "She is a security risk," Victoria insisted. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She crossed the aisle and stood over One-A. "You!" Victoria barked. The girl in the hoodie sighed a long, deep exhale that shook her whole frame. She pulled the hood back. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Lady," the girl said, her voice raspy, "I have had a week from hell. I have been in 4 airports in 3 days. I just want to sleep. Please, go away." "I want to see your boarding pass," Victoria demanded, holding out her hand. "Now." "You are not the police," the girl said, "and you aren't the crew." "I am a shareholder." Victoria lied. She owned a tiny mutual fund that included airline stocks, so in her mind, it wasn't a total lie. "And I demand to know who you are." "My name is Melissa," the girl said, "and that's all you need to know." "Melissa who Melissa the squatter," Victoria sneered. She looked at Sarah. "Get the purser. Better yet, get the captain. I am not taking off until this person is vetted." Sarah looked terrified. She was young, perhaps new to first class. She looked between the imperious, wealthy woman and the exhausted girl in the hoodie. "Ma'am," Sarah said to Melissa, "I am so sorry. Could you, just to settle this, could you show me your digital pass again, just so I can reassure Mrs. St. Clair?" Melissa looked at Sarah. There was a flash of disappointment in her eyes. "You want me to prove I belong here? Again?" "Just to keep the peace," Sarah pleaded. Melissa shook her head. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it up. Victoria leaned in, squinting. It was a digital boarding pass. Melissa Reynolds. Seat 1A. JFK. LHR. Class first. But there was something else. A small code at the bottom. Status VIP CL01. Victoria didn't know what CL01 meant, but she knew what a fake looked like. Anyone can Photoshop a screen, she scoffed. She probably hacked the app. Look at her. Does she look like she has $15,000? Melissa dropped the phone onto her lap. It's a company ticket. Aha! Victoria clapped her hands. I knew it. Which company? Which diversity program hired you and wasted their budget, flying you? First class, while the executives sit in the back. You're an intern, aren't you? Melissa rubbed her temples. Something like that. Well, intern, Victoria sneered, leaning closer, her perfume overpowering the space. Here is a lesson in corporate hierarchy. First class is for the people who built the company, not the charity cases they hire for tax breaks. You are making everyone uncomfortable. If you have any dignity, you will ask to be moved to economy where you fit in. Melissa stared at her. The fatigue was vanishing, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. You're right, Melissa said softly. Hierarchy is important. Glad you agree, but you're confused about where you stand in it. Victoria's face went red. Excuse me. You think because you have a husband's credit card and a vintage coat, you own the plane, Melissa said, sitting up straighter. But you're just a passenger who is bordering on assault. Assault! Victoria shrieked. I haven't touched you. You're invading my space, you're harassing me, and you're delaying the flight. Melissa looked at her watch, a beat-up digital Casio. We miss our slot. We sit on the tarmac for 2 hours. Do you want that? I want you off, Victoria shouted. The shouting had attracted attention. The purser, a stern woman named Elena, arrived from the galley. Behind her, standing in the cockpit doorway, was the first officer. What is going on here? Elena demanded, her voice cutting through the tension. This woman, Victoria pointed a shaking finger at Melissa, is refusing to identify herself properly. She is aggressive, and I do not feel safe flying with her. I want her removed. Elena looked at Melissa, then at the manifest in her hand. She looked back at Victoria. Mrs. St. Clair, Ms. Reynolds, is a ticketed passenger. If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will have to ask you to deplane. Victoria's jaw dropped. Me, you would kick me off. I am a gold medallion member. My husband is Jonathan St. Clair. I will have your job for this. She turned back to Melissa, her eyes wild. Victoria realized she was losing the room. The other passengers were looking at her with disgust, not solidarity. She needed to provoke the girl. She needed to prove the girl was ghetto, unstable, violent. Victoria reached out and grabbed the strap of Melissa's backpack, which was hanging slightly out of the overhead bin above seat 1A. If the crew won't remove your trash, I will, Victoria snarled, yanking the bag down. It was a clumsy move. The heavy bag slipped from her grip and fell, hitting Melissa's shoulder before crashing to the floor. A laptop inside made a sickening crack sound. The cabin went dead silent. Melissa looked down at the bag. Then she looked up at Victoria. She didn't scream. She didn't jump up and swing. She went perfectly still. You just touched my property, Melissa said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than Victoria's screaming. And you just hit me. It slipped, Victoria stammered, realizing she had crossed a physical line. Because you didn't stow it properly? Sarah, Melissa said, not looking away from Victoria. Sarah, the flight attendant, jumped. Yes, ma'am. Did you see Mrs. St. Clair pull my bag down and strike me with it? Sarah looked at Victoria, then at the floor. She was terrified of the wealthy woman's wrath, but she knew the rules. I saw the bag fall. Mrs. St. Clair had her hand on it. She threw it at me. Victoria lied, desperate now. She attacked me. "Liar!" the businessman in 2A shouted. "You pulled it down, lady. I saw it. You're crazy." Victoria felt the walls closing in. She needed to double down. "She is manipulating you all. She probably has a weapon in there. That's why she's so protective of it." Melissa unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'4", but she stood with a posture that suddenly made her look 7 feet tall. "Okay," Melissa said. "That's it." "Going to hit me?" Victoria taunted, bracing herself. "Go on, do it. Then you'll go to jail." "I don't need to hit you," Melissa said. She stepped into the aisle, bypassing Victoria entirely. She walked straight toward the cockpit door. "Where are you going?" Elena the purser asked, stepping in front of her. "Ms. Reynolds, you can't go to the cockpit." Melissa stopped. She looked Elena in the eye. "Tell Captain Anderson I need to speak to him. Now." "The captain is pre-flight checks," Elena said firmly. "Please take your seat." "Tell him it's code blue sky," Melissa said. Elena paused. She frowned. "What did you say now? Code blue sky? Tell him?" Victoria laughed from behind them. "Oh, listen to her secret codes now. She's probably a terrorist. Arrest her." Elena hesitated, then picked up the interphone to the cockpit. She whispered something. A moment later, her eyes widened. She hung up and looked at Melissa with a completely different expression, one of shock and dawning horror. He is coming out immediately," Elena stammered. Victoria smirked. "Finally. The captain will sort this out. Enjoy prison, sweetie." The cockpit door buzzed and swung open. Captain Anderson, a silver-haired veteran pilot with 4 stripes on his shoulders and the bearing of a military general, stepped out. He looked furious. "Who is causing the disturbance?" Anderson boomed. Victoria stepped forward, smoothing her hair, putting on her most charming, victimized smile. "Captain, thank goodness. It's this girl. She has been threatening me. She assaulted me, and she refuses to stay in her seat. I insisted she be removed for the safety of the flight." Anderson looked at Victoria. Then he looked at Melissa, who was standing quietly by the galley wall, arms crossed over her hoodie. Anderson's face softened instantly. He ignored Victoria completely and walked straight to Melissa. To the shock of the entire first-class cabin, the captain didn't pull out handcuffs. He didn't yell. He extended his hand. "Ms. Reynolds?" The captain said, his voice respectful and apologetic. "I was told you were on board, but I didn't realize you were in the cabin. I thought you were in the crew rest. Are you all right?" Melissa shook his hand. "I'm fine, Bob, but my laptop is broken, and I've been assaulted." Victoria's smile faltered. "Bob, you know her." Captain Anderson turned slowly to face Victoria. The warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by steel. "Mrs. St. Clair," the captain said, "I suggest you sit down and be quiet." "I will not," Victoria shrieked. "She is a nobody. I demand you kick her off." Melissa stepped forward, standing next to the captain. She looked at Victoria with a pitying expression. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" Melissa asked. "I don't care who you are." "You should," Melissa said. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a lanyard she hadn't been wearing. She slipped it over her head. The ID card at the bottom didn't look like a standard crew ID. It was black with gold lettering. Melissa Reynolds, CEO and owner, Stratton Airways. Melissa tapped the card. "I'm not an intern. I'm not a contest winner. I bought this airline 3 weeks ago." The silence in the cabin was so absolute you could hear the snowflakes hitting the fuselage. Victoria St. Clair stared at the black and gold ID card dangling from Melissa Reynolds's neck. Her brain, usually a steel trap for social calculations, had ground to a halt. The words CEO and owner seemed to dance in front of her eyes, mocking her. But denial is a powerful drug, especially for a woman who had spent 30 years believing she was the center of the universe. "This is ridiculous," Victoria scoffed, though her voice wavered. She looked around the cabin seeking allies. "Is this some kind of reality TV show? Is that it? You put a child in a hoodie, give her a fake badge, and see if the rich lady gets upset. I'm not buying it." She turned to Captain Anderson. "And you're in on it, aren't you? How much is she paying you to participate in this little skit?" Captain Anderson didn't blink. His face was made of granite. "Mrs. St. Clair, I assure you this is not a skit. Ms. Reynolds acquired the controlling stake in Stratton Airways, the parent company of this airline, 3 weeks ago, following the passing of her father, Preston Reynolds. She is the chairwoman of the board." The name Preston Reynolds hit the cabin like a physical blow. Everyone knew the name. He was an industrial titan, a man who owned shipping lines, railways, and 3 major airlines. He was old money, the kind of money that didn't need to shout because it whispered in the ears of presidents. Victoria felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew the name. Jonathan, her husband, had a framed photo of himself shaking hands with Preston Reynolds at a charity gala 10 years ago. Jonathan worshipped the ground Reynolds walked on. Melissa stepped closer, the hoodie suddenly looking less like a teenager's lazy outfit and more like the eccentric camouflage of a billionaire who didn't need to impress anyone. "You asked about my clothes," Melissa said, her voice steady and calm. "You asked why I look like this. Do you want to know?" Victoria didn't answer. She was gripping the leather headrest of seat 1A so hard her knuckles were white. "I've been in Zurich for 5 days," Melissa said, identifying my father's body, dealing with lawyers signing transfer deeds and fighting off sharks who wanted to break up his company before he was even in the ground. I haven't slept in 48 hours. I took the company jet back to New York, but it had a mechanical failure in Gander. I had to transfer commercial to get home for the funeral tomorrow. Melissa's eyes were dry, but the pain behind them was vast and deep. I just wanted to sit in my dad's favorite seat. Seat 1A. He used to sit here and read to me when I was a little girl. I just wanted to close my eyes and pretend he was still here. The silence in the cabin was heavy. The businessman in 2A wiped his eye. Sarah, the flight attendant, looked like she was about to cry. But Victoria St. Clair was not a woman who surrendered. Panic was setting in, but it was the panic of a trapped animal. She needed to find a way to be right. If she was wrong, her entire worldview would collapse. "Well," Victoria sniffed, straightening her spine, "that is a tragic story, I am sure. But it doesn't excuse the lack of protocol. You are the owner, fine. Then you should set an example. CEOs wear suits. They don't look like vagrants. I was simply protecting the integrity of the first-class experience. As a shareholder, I have that right." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "You keep saying that. Shareholder. How many shares do you own, Victoria?" "That is private financial information," Victoria snapped. Melissa pulled her phone back out. She tapped the screen 3 times. She had access to the passenger manifest, which was linked to the loyalty program, which, thanks to the new data integration she had approved 2 days ago, was linked to the corporate CRM. "Victoria St. Clair," Melissa read from the screen. "Member since 2014. You hold, let's see, 400 shares of the Stratton Global Fund." "It is a significant portfolio," Victoria lied. "It's worth about $8,000, Melissa said flatly. "Victoria, the fuel to taxi this plane from the gate to the runway costs more than your entire investment in this company." The doctor in seat 3A chuckled. Victoria whipped her head around to glare at him, but he just shrugged. "I will not be humiliated like this," Victoria shouted, her voice cracking. "I am calling my husband, Jonathan St. Clair. You might have heard of him, St. Clair Development. He is a devastatingly powerful man in this city. When I tell him that the owner of this airline assaulted me, yes, I am sticking to that story, and that her staff bullied me, he will sue you into oblivion. He will buy this airline just to fire you." Melissa sighed. She looked at the captain. "Bob, how long until we lose the departure slot?" 10 minutes, Ms. Reynolds," the captain said, checking his watch. "Traffic is backing up due to the snow." "Okay," Melissa said. She looked at Victoria. "Call him." "What?" Victoria blinked. "Call your husband," Melissa challenged. "Put him on speaker. Let's hear what the devastatingly powerful Jonathan St. Clair has to say." Victoria's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. She felt a surge of triumph. Jonathan would fix this. Jonathan always fixed things. He would scream at this girl, threaten legal action, and Melissa Reynolds would back down. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. "Victoria." Jonathan's voice filled the silent cabin. He sounded stressed. Background noise suggested he was at a party or a busy office. "I thought you were in the air. I'm in a meeting." "Jonathan," Victoria cried, putting on her most distressed voice. "You have to help me. I am being abused. I am on the plane, and this hooligan is claiming she owns the airline. She attacked me, Jonathan, and the captain is taking her side. I need you to call the legal team. I want to sue Stratton Airways. I want to own them by morning." There was a pause on the line. "Who?" Jonathan asked. "Who claims they own it?" "Some girl named Melissa," Victoria spat. "Melissa Reynolds. She's wearing a hoodie, Jonathan. It's absurd. She says she's Preston Reynolds' daughter." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. "Jonathan," Victoria asked, "did you hear me? I want you to destroy her." "Victoria." Jonathan's voice came back, but it wasn't angry at the airline. It was trembling. "Shut up!" Victoria froze. "Excuse me, I said shut up!" Jonathan screamed. The sound distorted on the speakerphone. "Did you say Melissa Reynolds? Is she there? Can she hear me?" "Yes, she is standing right here, looking smug," Victoria said, confused. "Why does it matter?" "You idiot," Jonathan roared. "You absolute idiot. Do you know where I am right now? I am in Tokyo. I am in the boardroom of Reynolds Global. I have been working for 6 months to get the bid to build their new logistics hub in Newark. It is a $400 million contract, Victoria. It is the only thing keeping us from bankruptcy." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "We are leveraged to the hilt, Victoria." Jonathan was hyperventilating. "If I land this deal, we are safe. If I don't, we lose the house. We lose everything. And you are telling me you are currently harassing Melissa Reynolds, the woman who has to sign the contract." Melissa stepped forward. She leaned toward the phone in Victoria's hand. "Hi, Jonathan," Melissa said. Her voice was ice cold. "Ms. Reynolds." Jonathan's tone shifted instantly to desperate pleading. "Please, I am so sorry. My wife, she is not well. She has been under stress. Please do not let her behavior reflect on St. Clair Development. We are professionals." "Jonathan," Melissa said calmly, "I'm looking at your proposal right now. I have it on my iPad. It's a solid proposal, Ms. Reynolds. We can come in under budget." "I'm deleting it," Melissa said. "No," Jonathan screamed. "No, please, Ms. Reynolds, wait." "It's deleted," Melissa said. "And Jonathan, I'm flagging your company as do not vendor for all Stratton subsidiaries. Airlines shipping rail. You'll never pour a cubic foot of concrete for us again." "Victoria," Jonathan screamed through the phone, a sound of pure, raw rage. "Fix this. Fix this right now, or don't bother coming home. Do you hear me? You have ruined us." Melissa reached out and tapped the red end call button on Victoria's screen. The cabin was silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside the fuselage. Victoria stood there, the phone slipping from her numb fingers and landing on the carpet. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her. The money, the house in the Hamptons, the social standing. It was all tied to Jonathan's business, and she had just nuked it. She looked up at Melissa. The arrogance was gone, replaced by terror. "Please," Victoria whispered. I didn't know." Melissa looked at her unmoved. "You didn't know who I was. That's your excuse. You thought I was poor, so it was okay to treat me like garbage. That's worse, Victoria. That's much worse." Melissa turned to the captain. "Bob, get her off my plane." Victoria St. Clair had imagined many ways her trip to London would begin. Sipping Dom Perignon, watching a movie, sleeping in a lie-flat bed. Being escorted off the plane by Port Authority police was not on the list. "I am not leaving," Victoria shrieked, clutching the armrest of seat 1K. The shock had worn off, replaced by a feral desperation. If she left this plane, it was real. If she stayed, maybe she could wake up from this nightmare. "I paid for this seat. You cannot do this." Two officers, large men with no patience for drama on Christmas Eve, stood in the aisle. Behind them, the airport manager looked weary. "Ma'am," the first officer, Officer Davis, said. "The pilot has refused transport. The owner of the aircraft has demanded your removal. You are trespassing. You can walk off, or we can drag you off. And looking at those heels dragging is going to be messy." "My husband will have your badges," Victoria threatened, though the threat sounded hollow, even to her ears. "Your husband just hung up on you." "Lady," the businessman in 2A shouted, "go home." "I am a victim here," Victoria yelled, kicking her legs as Officer Davis reached for her arm. "She assaulted me. She broke my mental state. Ma'am, we have witness statements from the flight crew and 3 passengers stating you threw a piece of luggage at Miss Reynolds," the officer said, snapping a pair of plastic zip ties from his belt. "That's assault. Now stand up." Victoria looked at Melissa. Melissa was sitting in seat 1A, her hood back up, typing on her phone. She didn't even look up as the police moved in. "Melissa," Victoria screamed, "please have mercy. It's Christmas." Melissa paused. She slowly lowered her phone. She turned her head to look at Victoria. The cabin held its breath. Was this the moment of grace? The holiday redemption arc? "It is Christmas," Melissa agreed softly. "And on Christmas people should be with their families. I can't be with my father. But you," Melissa gestured to the open cabin door. "You have a chance to go home and explain to your husband why he's bankrupt. I'm actually doing you a favor. You need to start packing your house." Victoria let out a wail that sounded like a dying banshee. Officer Davis had enough. He grabbed her arm, pulled her out of the seat, and spun her around. "You're hurting me. Stop resisting, Mom." They marched her down the aisle. The walk of shame was excruciating. As they passed from first class into the galley, the curtain to economy was open. 150 faces were turned toward her. People were holding up phones. The flash of cameras went off like paparazzi, but these weren't flattering photos for Vogue. These were for TikTok and Twitter. "Is that the lady who was screaming?" someone asked. "Yeah, she kicked a girl out of her seat." "Boo!" someone from the back shouted. "Merry Christmas, Karen," another voice yelled. Victoria tried to hide her face, but with her hands zip-tied behind her back, she could only lower her head. She saw her reflection in the darkened window as they dragged her onto the jet bridge. Her hair was messy, Her mascara was smeared, and her coat was twisted. She looked exactly like the mess she had accused Melissa of being. The cold air of the jet bridge hit her like a slap. The snow was swirling into the open door. As the officers hauled her up the ramp, Sarah, the flight attendant, came running out, holding Victoria's handbag. "You forgot this," Sarah called out. She handed the bag to the second officer. Victoria looked at Sarah, hoping for a sympathetic glance. Sarah just looked at her with a mix of pity and relief. "I cancelled your return ticket, Mrs. St. Clair, per company policy regarding assaulted crew OS owners. You've been placed on the no-fly list for Stratton and its partners." "No fly," Victoria gasped. "But we go to St. Bart's in February." "Not on us you don't," Sarah said, and the airlock door slid shut. Back on the plane, the atmosphere had transformed. It was lighter cleaner. The tension that Victoria had brought onto the aircraft had been purged. Melissa Reynolds sat in seat 1A. Her hands were trembling slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the exhaustion and the grief. Captain Anderson came out of the cockpit again. He knelt by her seat. "You okay, Melissa?" he asked gently. "I fired a vendor today, Bob," she whispered. "I cost a man his livelihood. That's not who I wanted to be. You didn't fire him because he was poor or because you didn't like his coat," the captain said firmly. "You fired him because his partner, his wife, attacked a passenger and humiliated my crew. You protected this plane. Your father would have done the exact same thing. Actually, Preston probably would have thrown her luggage onto the tarmac himself." Melissa managed a weak smile. "He probably would have." "We need to push back," Anderson said. "But before we do, the laptop. Is the hard drive okay?" Melissa picked up her backpack. She pulled out the cracked laptop. She tried to power it on. The screen flickered, spider-webbed with cracks, and remained black. "It's dead," Melissa said. "All the photos from the funeral home. The scans of the old family albums I was working on. They were on the desktop. I hadn't backed them up to the cloud yet." The captain winced. That was a blow. "However," Melissa said, a glint of steel returning to her eye, "this gives me an idea. A way to make sure the lesson sticks." "Oh, yeah. Victoria is going to be facing assault charges," Melissa said, tapping her phone. "But I think I'm going to press for civil damages, too. The destruction of corporate property and intellectual property. This laptop contains sensitive trade secrets. If I value the data at, say, $5 million, I think her husband's bankruptcy is going to be even faster than he thinks." She looked out the window where she could see a police cruiser flashing its lights on the tarmac below, carrying Victoria St. Clair away to a holding cell in Queens. "Karma isn't just a bitch, Bob," Melissa whispered, leaning back into the soft leather of seat 1A. "She's a CEO." While Flight 44 cruised silently at 38,000 feet over the dark Atlantic, a digital storm was brewing on the ground that was far more destructive than the blizzard outside JFK. Victoria St. Clair sat on a metal bench in a holding cell at the Port Authority police station. The room smelled of bleach and stale sweat. Her cashmere coat had been taken as evidence because it had snagged on the officer's belt during the scuffle, and she was left shivering in her silk blouse. She demanded her phone call. She called Jonathan again. "The subscriber you have dialed is currently unavailable." The robotic voice mocked her. She called the house line. No answer. She called her lawyer, Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur?" she cried when he finally picked up. "You have to get me out of here. It's a misunderstanding. I've been framed by a diversity hire who tricked me." "Victoria." Arthur's voice was strained. "I can't represent you. What you've been our family attorney for 20 years. Jonathan just fired the firm. Arthur said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He's trying to liquidate assets before the market opens tomorrow. Victoria, have you seen the internet? I don't care about the internet. I'm in jail. You need to care, Arthur said, because you're trending #1 worldwide. Higher than Christmas. Higher than the president. Arthur hung up. Victoria stared at the receiver. Trending. 2 hours later, she was released on her own recognizance, pending a court date for assault and battery. She walked out of the precinct into the blinding flash of cameras. She thought it was the paparazzi, her usual crowd, but these were different. These were streamers, bloggers, and angry New Yorkers with iPhones. "Hey, Victoria, how's the first-class service in jail?" Someone shouted. "Apologize to Melissa," another yelled. Victoria pushed through the crowd, shielding her face, and hailed a cab. The driver looked at her, then at the photo on his news feed, mounted on the dashboard, then back at her. "I'm off duty." He lied, locking the doors and driving away. It took her 40 minutes to find a ride. When she finally opened her phone in the back of a smelly Uber, she saw what Arthur meant. A passenger in seat 2A, the businessman had filmed the entire interaction. The video was titled, "Entitled Karen Attacks Grieving Daughter Who Owns the Airline. Instant Karma." It had 45 million views in 4 hours. Victoria watched in horror. The video was crystal clear. It showed Melissa's exhaustion, her politeness. It showed Victoria's sneering face, the way she grabbed the bag, the way she screamed about charity cases. But the comments were the real executioners. User 88. "I know that lady that's Victoria St. Clair. She once yelled at a waiter at my restaurant for putting ice in her wine. She's a monster." Fly Girl. "Melissa Reynolds is a saint. She just lost her dad, and this witch attacks her. Boycott St. Clair Development." Stock Watcher. "St. Clair Development stock is going to act like a brick tomorrow. Shorting it now." The internet detectives had done their work. They had found Jonathan's business pages. They had found Victoria's charity galas. They were dismantling the St. Clair reputation, brick by brick. By the time Victoria got to her penthouse on the Upper East Side, the doorman who usually greeted her with a smile refused to make eye contact. "Mr. St. Clair left instructions," the doorman said, handing her a keycard. "He said you are to stay in the guest wing. He doesn't want to see you." Victoria rode the elevator up, her heart pounding. She entered the penthouse. It was quiet. Too quiet. In the hallway, suitcases were lined up. Not hers. Jonathan's. He was standing in the living room drinking scotch, straight from the bottle. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. "You destroyed it," Jonathan said. He didn't yell. His voice was dead. 30 years of building this brand. My father's company. Gone in a 3-minute video clip. "We can fix it, Jonathan," Victoria pleaded, reaching for him. "We can sue them for recording without consent. We can spin it." Jonathan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Spin it." Victoria Stratton Airways just issued a press release. "They aren't just banning you. They are suing me. You, for vicarious liability, and for the loss of the contract. They are claiming that my company, through its principles, that you engaged in corporate sabotage. No one will touch us. The bank called. They're calling in the loans on the Jersey project." Jonathan threw the empty bottle into the fireplace. It shattered. "I want a divorce," he said. Victoria froze. You can't. We have a prenup. You'd have to pay me millions." "I don't have millions." "Victoria," Jonathan screamed, finally losing control. "By tomorrow morning, I will be negative 20 million. You can have half of nothing." 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. It wasn't often that a simple assault case drew this much media attention, but the Flight 44 incident had become a cultural touchstone. It was a symbol of the class war of entitlement versus humility. Melissa Reynolds sat in the front row. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wearing a sharp black power suit that fit her perfectly. She looked every inch the CEO of a global logistics empire. Beside her sat Captain Anderson, now the Chief Operations Officer of Stratton Airways. Victoria St. Clair sat at the defense table. She looked smaller. The blonde helmet of hair was gone, replaced by a limp graying bob she had colored herself. She wore a department store suit that didn't fit quite right. Her lawyer, a court-appointed public defender, since Arthur Pendleton had long since abandoned her, was shuffling papers nervously. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Halloway, looked over her spectacles at Victoria. "Mrs. St. Clair," the judge began. "Or is it Ms. Miller now?" "Ms. Miller, Your Honor," Victoria whispered. The divorce had been finalized last week. Jonathan had declared bankruptcy and fled to the Cayman Islands to hide what little cash he had left. Victoria had been left with the debts and her maiden name. "Ms. Miller, you have pleaded guilty to assault and destruction of property to avoid a jury trial," the judge said. "A wise choice given the video evidence. I have read the victim impact statement." The judge looked at Melissa. "Miss Reynolds, do you wish to speak?" Melissa stood up. The courtroom went silent. "Thank you, Your Honor," Melissa said. Her voice was strong, carrying to the back of the room. "I don't want to talk about the assault. My shoulder healed. I don't want to talk about the laptop. We recovered the data." Melissa turned to look directly at Victoria. Victoria couldn't meet her eyes. "I want to talk about dignity," Melissa said. "On that flight, I was at the lowest point of my life. I was an orphan. I felt alone in the world. And this woman saw that vulnerability and decided to use it as a stepping stone to make herself feel tall." Melissa paused. "My father Preston Reynolds built his company on a simple motto: every seat has a story. He believed that the person in 1A and the person in 34E deserve the same safety and the same respect. Ms. Miller didn't just break a laptop. She tried to break that code. She tried to enforce a caste system in the sky." Melissa took a deep breath. "I am not asking for prison time, Your Honor. Prison is for people who are a danger to society. Ms. Miller isn't dangerous anymore. She's just irrelevant." Victoria flinched. That word hurt more than a slap. "I am asking," Melissa continued, "that part of her sentence be community service. Specifically, I would like her to serve 500 hours working in the customer service baggage claim center at JFK. I want her to spend her days helping people find their lost things. I want her to learn what it feels like to serve rather than to be served." The judge's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. "That is creative, Ms. Reynolds." The gavel banged. "Victoria Miller, I sentence you to 2 years of probation, restitution in the amount of $15,000 for the damaged property, and 500 hours of community service at the JFK Lost and Found Department to be monitored by Stratton Airways HR." It was Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year later. The JFK terminal was chaotic. Snow was falling again. In the basement level of Terminal 4, the Lost and Found office was a cramped fluorescent-lit room piled high with strollers' coats and confused tourists. Victoria Miller wiped sweat from her forehead. She was wearing a blue polyester vest that was 2 sizes too big. Her feet ached in cheap orthopedic shoes. "Excuse me," a man shouted from the counter. "I've been waiting 10 minutes. I lost my duty-free bag." "I'm coming, sir. Please be patient," Victoria said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. She found the bag. She handed it over. The man didn't say thank you. He just snatched it and walked away. Victoria sighed and sat back on her stool. She took a sip of lukewarm water from a plastic cup. She looked up at the TV mounted in the corner of the waiting area. It was tuned to a news channel, and in business news the anchor announced Stratton Airways has just reported record profits for the fourth quarter. CEO Melissa Reynolds credits the success to their new Open Sky initiative, which provides travel grants to underrepresented communities. On the screen, Melissa Reynolds was cutting a ribbon on a new plane. She looked radiant, strong, and kind. Standing next to her was Captain Anderson, laughing. Victoria watched the screen. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Hey, lady," a voice shouted from the counter. "Are you sleeping? I lost my iPad." Victoria shook her head, clearing the memory of champagne and leather seats. She stood up, straightened her cheap blue vest, and walked to the counter. "I'm here," she said quietly. "How can I help you?" It wasn't first class, but for the first time in her life, Victoria was finally earning her seat. And that is the story of how one act of arrogance brought down an empire. Victoria thought her money made her untouchable, but she forgot that in the air, turbulence hits everyone the same. She judged a book by its hoodie, and she paid the ultimate price. Melissa proved that true power isn't about how loud you scream, but how you handle yourself when the storm hits. What do you think? Did Victoria deserve the lost and found punishment, or should she have gone to jail? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more stories where the good guys win and the entitled get exactly what they deserve. Thanks for watching, and stay humble.